I got a notice in the mail, an email from a friend of mine named Vanessa Rennick. And Vanessa, along with her, I think her boyfriend, Bill Daniels, they were through town a couple years ago. They were on this show one time. They had a movie, Bill's movie called Bozo Tahino. It was about hobos riding the rails. And it was a cool thing. We showed it at the No Exit, and he had this great soundtrack with the rumbling of the trains. And uh, so she told me about a guy named Marc Moscato, and I keep wanting to call you Marco. Does anyone ever do that? Just Mark.
Just Mark.
Okay, you're just gonna be Mark for now. And Mark is here. He's out of Portland.
Yeah.
He's
live in
out of
Portland,
Portland, and you know he's. I heard when I heard some gossip about you coming to town, I heard there was this kind of a jazz guy coming, a guy who knows a lot about jazz. But then I read the description, and I'm going to read it to everyone here. Um, uh, you have a video installation. It's part of the Brains, Brilliancy, Bohemia, Art and Politics in Jazz Age Chicago exhibit, which is currently at Mess Hall, I think through April 26th.
Yep, till the 26th.
And
yeah.
Mess Hall is down the street at 6932 North Glenwood. Um, and you have a video over there that you're making or have made called The More Things Stay the Same, and it's a short documentary examining the life and world of a Dr. Ben Reitman, who was born in 1879 and died the year I was born, 1942. And he was known in his day as the Clap Doctor, King of the Hobos, and the most vulgar man in America. Marc Moscato, tell us a little bit about Ben Reitman and what attracted you to study him.
Yeah, well, I first came across, actually, I was an intern for Bill Daniel and Vanessa Rennick, these two filmmakers who used to live in Portland, Oregon.
They have a company called Department of Kick-Ass Films.
That's Vanessa Rennick's moniker, yeah. And I met them in Portland in 2002, and they were planning this extensive 3.5-month-long tour of little art galleries, art spaces around the United States, everything from like a punk kid's basement to the Museum of Contemporary Art. So it was like a very diverse, kind of interesting, very do-it-yourself spirit of showing films in places that maybe films aren't usually shown in. And I really liked that spirit, and I learned a great deal from them. I silkscreen posters for them, I booked shows for them around the country when they were doing this 3.5-month-long tour. And Bill, of course, made this great film called Who is Bozo Texino, which is a search for Railroad's greatest graffiti artist, Bozo Texino, which is this guy Grandpa down in Austin, Texas. And I started reading a lot about hobos and hobo memoirs, and a lot about the Industrial Workers of the World, which were a radical union, of course, founded here in 1905 in Chicago, that represented the labor conditions, represented hobos, migratory workers in Chicago and elsewhere. So in all this, I came across a book called Sister of the Road, the autobiography of Boxcar Bertha, written by Dr. Reitman. And then at the end of the book, there's this afterword, and it talks about the guy who wrote it and how it kind of came into being. And it turns out the book is this composite character, and in many ways, it's this really experimental book. The story goes that Emma Goldman, his longtime lover, and he was her press agent, was writing "Living My Life," her autobiography. And
she and Reitman were hooked up?
Yeah.
Okay.
They had this kind of tumultuous love affair for 10 years, off and on, off and on, off and on. And anyways, he knew he was not going to be given a very flattering, portrait in her book. So he felt the rush to put out his own story. And he wrote this book, and it was rejected by the publisher. And a year later, the publisher called him back up and said, "We really want a story about a woman tramp." So he kind of wrote this book about his life cast as a woman. So it was called The Autobiography of Boxcar Bertha, Sister of the Road. And
so Boxcar Bertha was a guy.
Yeah, it was Ben Reitman, basically. And the more that I started reading more about him, and it was just a hobby interest, and I read that there were the Ben Reitman papers here at the University of Illinois, and I came out here on a research trip, basically, with no real idea in mind. And at that time, I met some historians, Franklin and Penelope Rosemont, who wrote this great book called The Rise and Fall of the Dill Pickle. Also, they run Charles H. Kerr Publishers, the oldest socialist
They've
publisher.
been guests on this show, and I got to say that they're involved with the Surrealist movement, and they will be having a show here in the fall. They're going to have a new surrealist show. That's Penny and Franklin Rosemont.
Yeah, so I met them, and I also met his daughters, who are still living here in the Illinois area, and just got to hang out at these, at the libraries. And I kind of developed the idea that it would be, it was more and more interesting to me, so I decided to start shooting interviews. And I came back to Chicago, and it's been kind of this very organic process where I saved up a little bit of money, was able to come out to Chicago, was able to develop another roll of film, and then kind of come back here again and again. And so this has been going on for about 5 or 6 years. And a few years ago, I was in the Newberry Library where they have the Dill Pickle Club records. It's interesting to note that the Dill Pickle Club was this kind of radical bohemian nightclub that existed in Chicago, and the doctor, Dr. Ben Reitman, the clap doctor, was the publicist for the club. So that's kind of the tie-in there. And one of the librarians came up to me and started asking me about what I was doing and what I was researching and what my project was. And she mentioned that they had these fellowships for independent scholars that they award once a year. So I was able to apply for this fellowship, and I received the fellowship and was able to come to Chicago for a month-long period and kind of really invest myself and look through the collections there. And through that, I kind of developed the idea to do this exhibition at Mess Hall. So when you go into the space, kind of describe the show. It's my video is on a loop. It's a 12-minute installation. There's an audio piece, an interview with Studs Terkel about Hobohemia, Chicago. And then there's reproductions of the materials from the Dill Pickle records and various Hobohemian ephemera. And it's all actually, it's just photocopied. So it's an interesting way to present, kind of look back at this interesting kind of lost counterculture. A lot of people don't know about this. If you ask the average person on the street who Ben Reitman is, or even the history of anarchism or labor history in Chicago, it's a really beautiful story and something that I think we should never forget.
Well, you got a lot going on for you. I got to say that if I hadn't read Big Bill Haywood's autobiography, I'd have probably been a conservative Republican. But I did read it. A guy named Carl Perini, I don't know if he's listening. He was teaching at Northern Illinois. I think he's retired, but he was a progressive historian out of Madison under William Appleman Williams, and he turned me on to this book. And, it was one of the things that really influenced me. The Wobblies were big in this town. They were big in America, and a lot of people don't know about it. Just a little story. We were on, what's that television show where they review the restaurants on Channel 11? Who knows that? Anyone? Alpena Singh. Anyhow, we...
Check, please.
Check, please. That's it. Thank you very much. Check, please. And we were Heartland Cafe was on that show, and the guy who now has his own show but was Jerry Springer's bouncer was one of the people reviewing the restaurant. And he did say that he really didn't think he'd like it, but he did like it. But the story he kept telling was they have all this communist stuff on the walls. And what he didn't get was that we had the 100th anniversary of the Industrial Workers of the World show going on at that time. So I think he thought we were trying to turn everybody into Wobblies.